You are listening to Arete Coach Podcast, exploring the art and science of executive coaching, hosted by Severin Sorensen. Today's guest is Richard Bosworth, CEO of What If Forums. This recording was made on April 27th, 2002.
What If Forums, an executive coaching practice that started in 1967, operates from London, England, and today works with national and international businesses, large and small, helping them grow. As we begin, I want to share that Richard is also one of my good friends and executive coaching peers who I esteem highly. I thought speaking with Richard today would be a strong way to start off my new Arete Coach podcast that seeks to explore excellence and the art and science of executive coaching today. Welcome, Richard.
Welcome, Seth. Thank you for inviting me to join you this morning.
Well, we're reaching across the pond today, so I thought it was appropriate to put my old school in there of King's College, and so I'm coming to you from the sunny backs of King's College there in Cambridge.
I'll forgive you that. I couldn't find a suitable background, so you find me sitting in my converted office at home. But the content, I hope, is more important than the surroundings.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, to get us started, please share a brief overview of your executive coaching practice today.
Okay, before I start going into that, I've got to say that I'm an unconventional coach. I fell into coaching way back before it was even popular, and I didn't know I was a coach. It's only latterly that I've come to accept that what I do would be classed as coaching. And why I say I'm not conventional is because my why and why I'm driven is that I believe in challenging the status quo. I like to get people to look at things through fresh eyes and with fresh thoughts and try out new things and do them differently. And that is what drives me all the time. This is why I'm so excited to be doing this as a pilot interview, as the first off there. And the second thing is that I am what I would call now an ideation facilitator. It's built around the idea of discovery learning. Okay, it's the basic concept is thousands of years old, but discovery learning has become much more popular now because we've had engaged learning, we've had rote learning. And they've worked well, but this whole discovery by asking people, what if, and that's where our name comes from, is a key to the whole thing. So what I'm looking at is that in the future, people have got to be more interested in the what if and what goes on behind them. And I'm the promoter of the new ideas and saying to them, what about this new idea? That's an important part for me. And Rosalind Torres summed up the challenge for all of us as coaches, facilitators, ideation people is there are three challenges for the 21st century leader. One, how do you broaden your sources of information and ideas? Two, how do you extend and diversify your network? And three, how willing are you to let go of the past and step out into the unknown? And they're three questions that have come to mean so much to me. So, to answer your question more directly, having set the scene, is that I have two divisions in my business. One is the traditional peer group coaching methodology called the What If Forum. And the second is the digital version called the What If Business Accelerator. The primary target audience for both of them is the same. Successful SME leaders and owners who are looking for fresh ideas and inspiration to become awesomely successful leaders. They're leading organizations of 300 to 500 people. They're movers and shakers, thought leaders and change makers who want to create an awesome tomorrow today. The big thing that I've learned is that I don't want to be a business doctor or a business blood donor, because those people just suck it out of you. They will take you for a cup of coffee. They will ply you with questions, take everything from you, and then not even pay for the coffee. And I mean, I must confess that at one stage I knew every coffee shop and where the best coffee was in town, but it wasn't making me any money. It's this whole thing of looking at the right audience.
That's awesome. I love your comment about the business blood donor. That's awesome. Well, surely you didn't start here. You've arrived at a certain point. And I'm curious, can you tell me about your personal journey? What prepared you to be a coach?
Okay. The 6-line answer is that I started out as an agricultural scientist. I graduated into marketing and corporate life, turning round lost brands, if you like, and that took me to lost businesses. I then escaped socialism and rampant inflation here in the UK in the mid-70s to go to Sunshine and Change, which was South Africa. Meant to be for 10 years, but I stayed for 23. 8 of them was working for the American corporation, which was called Corn Products Company, which is now part of Unilever's. Mm-hmm. And there I learnt the real art of business management apropos American companies, which is totally different from the British approach and has been very successful. Then I took my savings and I started out my own private consultancy practice called Richard Bosworth and Associates Business Development Specialists. With that, I became a coach, mentor, and tormentor to chief executives. And I was in a fortunate position that the country was going through socio-political change. And I learned how to help people when there is great uncertainty, but you're expected to deliver the results to the shareholders and the stakeholders that were planned and promised 18 months previously. And then when the apartheid fell, I returned to the UK at the suggestion of my major clients. And that's when I came across peer group development process of the old tech corporation. And that's what got me into what I'm doing now. However, if I slot in very carefully, it was in 1995, just after the government had changed in South Africa, that I came across Thomas Leonard, an article about coaching. And you know those sort of light bulb moments. I knew this was the man I had to talk to. So I booked myself into the first International Coach Federation meeting in Houston. And when my wife asked me why, I said, I have no idea. And she said, well, wait a minute, you're going 10,000 miles for something you don't know, and you don't know why. And I said, yep, but believe in me, it's right. It's one of those few trips that I've set off where the base camp is, we may not be here when you get back. However, when I got over there, I met people like myself who were working for IBM, for Coke, for Caterpillar, all of us searching for the same thing. And I came away knowing that the tele-coaching that I'd set up was the way ahead. And the amazing part about that was I had 12 clients all over Africa who I'd never met. I knew the most about them. I always said to people, if I was to meet them in Johannesburg airport, they could walk right past me because I didn't know what they looked like. All I knew was what they sounded like. but I knew everything about it. And that's what really got me into coaching.
Well, Richard, let me pause there. You mentioned tele-coaching. Plato said that necessity is the mother of our invention. How did you get into tele-coaching? Why that? That seems to be kind of early.
Quite simple. I was doing it already for my business development, social, political change clients, in that I had decided when we went out of South Africa, I had given up the drudgery of London and its dampness and commuting 2 or 3 hours every morning. And I wanted to go to sunshine and I wanted to live by the sea. Great place, Durban, but it's a long way from the economic center, which is Johannesburg. So I used to go up and down every week on the airplane and stay a week in Johannesburg and then come home for the weekend. And because I couldn't open an office, or I couldn't find the people to open an office in Johannesburg for me, and it was the clients who couldn't find the people, because I gave them the problem. They said they wanted me to be near at hand. I said I would be, but if we set up an office, they'd have to provide me with people. After 2 years, they said, can't find it. And so we started what has now been called tele-coaching. And that's how I started it. And from that, I picked up chief executives, and I had one, what do you call it? Not quite missionary, but there was international charity doing welfare work in Central Africa. So yes, I fell into it by accident, not by design. What was funny, you see, was when I arrived in Houston, there were all these guys sitting there. How do we do it? I said, well, I just do tele-coaching. And several of them left that conference and said, I'm going to start doing it. And we've stayed in touch, and they are still doing the tele-coaching from the comfort of their decks in sunny Florida and New Orleans, and they're dealing with snowbound Iowa and Minnesota, and loving every minute of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you decided to become a coach, when you formally said, okay, this is my profession, how did you just say, okay, how am I going to prepare myself for this? What's my learning path? Was there curiosity that you leaned into in terms of, well, now that I've determined to be a coach, how can I be the best coach?
I have to confess, I have a box in our garage that has traveled from South Africa here to the UK, which is over 20 years ago. And it's a box that I will not allow anybody to put in the skip. It is the notebooks from Thomas Leonard's Coach You. 20 volumes of pure magic. I poured over that. They're well thumbed, they're dog-eared, they're marked of things. That man was a genius. He did it so beautifully, so simply, so clearly. You just have to follow what he said. But like me, I'm always sort of saying, well, if that's how Thomas does it, there must be a better way of doing it. So, because that's the status quo. Yeah. And I then went out and found people and practiced with people. The biggest learn for me was after 20 years of consulting, to drop that hard wiring for consulting. By that I mean, most of us who are in consulting or in consulting, we have a toolkit that we carry around with us. And if we're totally honest, we are looking for patients who need the toolkit. So you go in and I meet you for the first time. I've got a list of questions carefully designed to uncover the problem that you're suffering from and that I can fix. And if we're smart, within a matter of hours, we can have ourselves a deal. And like all consultants, 12-week cycle between you and I meeting and the first check deposited into my bank account. Becoming a coach and becoming an ideation coach or a self-discovery coach, no, you're not looking for the problem you can fix. You're looking for the problem that the client or prospect or member, whatever you like to call it, is looking to solve. And then you're looking, like Socrates, the why. Why do you think that? And that was the biggest challenge. And I've got to thank a chap called Jim Davis, who took us on a program in San Diego called The Sixth Level. It was a frightening experience because Jim started off with a very simple proposition. What are you most proud of? Or what is your biggest disappointment? And the amazing part about it, when you ask people to ask of the person who said, this is my proudest moment, if you ask the right questions and you ask them carefully, people will start unloading and revealing themselves. And what is scary is, of the 20 of us around the table, not one of us failed to go back to when we were 6, 7 years old. And I have to confess, Kleenex did a wonderful business on those 2 days because everybody was reduced almost to tears because of the sudden realization. And of course, there was this sort of comment from people, but I'm not a trained psychologist. I shouldn't be going in this area. And then I said, do you know what? When I sat there in the chair, I wanted to talk about what it was, because I was discovering things that I hadn't worked out because nobody had asked me these questions. That was a wonderful insight to what makes an awesome coach.
Oh, that is amazing. Well, I'm already going to have to dive back in and look at some of these resources you said. So that's a treasure. I have a question for you. So, you know, it's been said before, and I know that I felt this way, that your early years of coaching, you learn so much that at the end of each year, you feel like you've been doing malpractice because you've learned new things coming in. So if you today could talk to your new self, the person who started in coaching, what have you learned today? What's your wisdom today that you wish you would have had when you started out?
A good question. The wisdom is to be able to, again, quickly discern the people that really value what you do. There are a lot of people who are looking for praise and reassurance. There are a lot of people who are wanting to hide away from what it is that's confronting them. There are very few people who have got the courage to say, okay, I've got to change. And the early days it was wonderful work because you were helping people to see things. But then when you stopped at the end of the year, you said, how many have moved from okay to okay plus? Not from okay to great. And what I found now, as you've seen in my payoff line, we create awesomely successful leaders. We do that because right at the start, we look at the people and say, do they get what we do? Do they want what we do? And are they prepared to graft for it? Because it was interesting. I have an alumni group which is now nearly 40 strong. So you can see members stay with me for an awful long time. And when we had an alumni meeting on Zoom a few weeks ago, one of the things that the group all said was, this is a different group from ordinary groups. And one of them said, do you know what? There were several times I wanted to walk out of this group because it was telling me things that I did not want to hear. And then I looked around the group and thought, well, all these people they must know something that I don't know. So I better stick around a bit longer. He turned a value business it was valued at 3 million when he went into it. He left it 6 years later, worth 12 million. And his dad, when they did the final signing off and check handing over, his dad, who is a non-emotional, demonstrative person, stood up and hugged him and said, William, I couldn't have done it without you, and you couldn't have done it without that group. We owe you you and them an awful lot. And that's what I mean about people who are prepared to make the change.
Yeah, I go back to earlier you mentioned one of your jobs is the chief tormentor. And you need people who are willing to be open and accept and work. And I agree with you. It's wonderful when you can see that. Now, earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that Plato was all about the why. Recently, popular business writer Simon Sinek has written a book about the why. If I were to turn that question on you, what is your why, and how does that give you purpose or energy?
Okay, it's quite simple. The why, as I mentioned earlier, is I believe passionately in challenging the status quo. And I am driven by helping people to see things through fresh eyes and look at different ways of doing things. And I want to inspire them to do that. If you take Senec's why, it then asks you the how. And I think that's also the critical part about it. And my how is bringing together a diverse group of business leaders and engaging them in thought-provoking conversations that lead them to take decisively different action in the whole thing. And that's the point, that it's not about just having the conversation and saying, that was nice. It was about saying, okay, so as happened 10 days ago, one of our members who's in the vending machine business, he provides vending machines and all the things that go into it. One of the roles I have is this ideation, and telemetry and vending machines was something I raised with him 5 years ago. He is now big in telemetry, but with the lockdown, 3/4 of his markets disappeared. Factories and offices are closed. Even schools, universities closed, gyms closed, all of those things, they've gone. And he's sitting there and wondering, what do I do? I've got a core business left, but it doesn't need all the people, it doesn't need everything there. And all I said was, what's your core competency? What's your point of difference? And it didn't take him long to say telemetry. And then I said, okay, you're using a distribution system. Who are the other people that would need what you do? Not just refreshments and drinks and so forth, but what else? And I've never seen anybody light up and bounce around so quickly, because he suddenly realized, yeah, it's not just the distribution, it's what do I do with that data that I know about what's going on there? So it's thought-provoking conversations with often ideas planted in there that they haven't thought about. That's the how we do it.
Okay. Well,
in there.
That's wonderful. So take me to the best day ever for you as an executive coach. What was that day? Why was it the best day ever for you?
Gee whiz. Right. Every day is a wonderful day because every day I wake up knowing that somebody somewhere will do something different that I've had a part in. There are so many great days. That's the beauty of this job, that there are almost every day I wake up knowing that somewhere, somehow, I've made a difference in somebody's life. Maybe not directly, but indirectly, but it's the stories that I get back that make every day so rewarding. Whether it's William telling the story about his father hugging him, which was something unique for him, something unique for me. Whether it's about the member the other day suddenly getting excited because he could see a way forward where 20 minutes earlier he was sort of, I don't want to go back to a business quarter the size. I don't want to go back to having just a few people around me. I wanted what I had before. So yeah, there's nothing. It's just the joy of knowing that we've helped somebody see things differently, do it differently, and be successful. Okay. That's the best way I can answer it.
Well, good. Well, it's certainly one of the reasons why it's such a fulfilling position. So here's a question, and it's actually about questions itself. What is the most powerful question you've ever asked as an executive coach?
I've asked it more times than I care to remember. It's a very simple question. What does your family think? So many people are doing it, when you really get down to it, they're doing what they do for their family. But they never think to ask their family if that is what they want. And just asking that simple question opens up a whole new avenue of discovery.
So that's interesting to me that you would ask that. The top answers you'd hear is what keeps you up at night, what concerns you, what you be working on now. But I have to say, the first I've ever said that I've heard, what does your family think? So where do the answers go from there?
The answers go into relationships, expectations, this belief that I'm doing it for the family. What it does is it takes us away from the business and it takes us into the real person. We've had answers like, I don't think my wife really cares about the business. Oh, why not? Well, because it takes me away too much from her. Oh, what does that mean? I'm not surprised if she's got a toy boy or something like that. Oh, so what does that mean to you? I ought to face up to it. Okay, so what are you going to do? I'm going to talk to her tonight and ask her, is she happy? Okay? We'll wait and hear what the answer is. The answer came back. Do you know what? She'd been thinking the same thing. Did I really care about her, or was the business the mistress? And that, yes, they brought up two great children, but they really didn't have the interest. By the end of the evening, they decided to separate. They decided how to do it with the house, with her family, with everything. And he said, do you know what? We had the happiest dinner that evening that we've ever had. That was 10 years ago. Saw him 2 months ago. Yeah, wife's happy, we're divorced. I've got a new girlfriend. But that one question, nobody ever thought to ask me. What does the family think?
Wow, great question there. Questions are certainly one of the tools that coaches use. Can you give me an idea of the tools that you use in your coaching practice? What's in your tool bag?
Oh, myriad of tools. Again, being a consultant, I never stop looking for questions to ask. However, there are 3 tools that I think are the ones I use the most. The first is what I call the aspiration guide. You might know it as the be, do, have chart. That is absolutely fascinating because on the one side, it asks you in your private life, what do you want to be, do, and have? And on the other side of the page is in your business and professional life, what do you want to be, do, and have? Having got that information, you ask the simple question, is what you've answered in terms of your business going to deliver what you want in terms of your personal life? And of course, then that opens up a whole conversation about, well, you filled in the business side of it in a matter of minutes. I've sat here and watched you ponder the personal side for some considerable time. And what you've put down is fairly sketchy and vague. Why? And then you get a whole discussion about the family, the business, whatever. It's a wonderful tool. And again, about last year, one of my old members from way back in the noughties came to me I was in a restaurant having a one-to-one with one of our members, and he came sidling up and he said to the member, do you mind if I just interrupt? I haven't seen Richard in years. I think you'll be interested in this. And he put down his aspiration guide on the table and said, I've ticked off everything. I've done what I said I was going to do. I need another session with you because I need to do the next bit.
Yeah.
And the member looked at me and thought, oh shit, excuse my French. This is obviously a relationship that goes on for a long time. And I said to him, yep. Once you're with me, I've got a tool or a trick to keep you in there all the time. The other tool is listening to your gut. I'm sure we've all had it, that moment when you think, what do I ask now? Lawyers always say you never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Our business is you ask the question that you have no clue where it's going to take you. And yes, it's true. I sit and the members make a joke about this. When Richard sits there pondering, he either got a devious question he's going to try and ask you, or he hasn't got a clue. Either way, he's going to floor you in there. And the other one said, yeah, don't ever go to a coaching session with Richard thinking that everything with the world was with rights with you. He said, I did that one day. I drove the 40 miles to see him, and I was full of the joys of spring. 10 minutes into the conversation, he'd floored me. I was furious. For the next 2 hours, I just argued and argued. And on the drive home, I got about 15 miles home and stopped next to the lake and thought, bastard, he's right. Where the hell did he get this question from? And he phoned me up and said, I'm sitting here at Houston Dam. Where did that question come from? And I said, Gary, I have no idea. So,
a reservoir of great questions.
But also the other tool, which I think coaches tend to forget the power of is the silence. One of the things my group have learned over the years is that silence is when the heavy lifting is done. And when you sat there in the seat, you think you're quiet for an eternity to try to sort things out. So those are the three tools.
So thus far, we've talked about success. I'd like for you to share with us, if you are willing, what either your greatest or one of your significant failures has been as a coach, and what have you learned from it that's improved your coaching practice and your life?
Okay. I'm going to step out of the 1995 to present era and go back to the early 90s. I was flying. I was busy in South Africa with socio-political change. We'd had the announcement that Nelson Mandela was going to be released, and everyone was looking forward to a bright future, yours are truly included. And one of the things that I recognized was there was a lack of management development training. And I took it upon myself to set up a management development learning center. Invested quite a deal of money in the project and had the support of some major clients behind me. Wrong time, wrong place, not quite the right focus, lots of things I can say, but we didn't go the way we wanted to. And it brought me close to the brink of financial ruin. I had to think hard and long about what I was going to do. And eventually I decided to push the business over rather than have a creditor do it for me. We lost a considerable amount of money, but we managed to stay afloat. But what I learned was the people that came and helped me were the true friends, and they weren't the people that I thought was going to help me. And they helped me get myself back on my feet and in various ingenious ways. So you ask, well, how does that anecdote fit in with the coaching? We all take risks. We all believe we're optimists and we all believe we're going to come out all right, but it doesn't always work. And we've had occasions in the group where people have taken horrendous risks. And I've been able to say to them, stop, think. What's your plan B? What's your plan C? And some of them have got very close to being on the edge. It's the fact that I've been able to empathize with them about what goes through your mind. What do they say? You can't understand a person until you've walked in their shoes. And for me, it is because I understand, but the group has come to learn that I am not just all about success. I've known failure and I've known what it can do. That's been my biggest lesson, and it's been one of the biggest things that has held people to me. I am not trying to be Superman. I am not trying to be Mr. I've got it right. I've made mistakes. This is part of the testament to it, and that's what you're buying.
Okay. Thank you for that. It's always interesting the situations that we pick and how we've framed it to become successful in terms of helping our future lives. A different question. We've talked to someone about this, but you've coached, over a number of years. How has your executive coaching changed over time?
It's changed in two ways. Number one, as I said to you earlier on, I have stopped being the business doctor, the business blood donor, and I'm looking for the right type of person. And I'm not looking at your business now if you pass the health check, as far as we're concerned, what I'm in is about tomorrow. And it's about, so what do you need to be where you want to be tomorrow? And we had an interesting presentation from a chap called Nick Owen from the Industrial Forum here in the UK. And he was talking about core competences and capabilities. So, you know where you are now, you know your core competencies, you know your core capabilities, and you know your competitive advantage. If you are going to pivot into the future, what of the existing core competencies do you need to enhance? What capabilities do you need to have? And it is then getting people to think about that. One of the members on Friday, the one-to-one, said to me, I am going to go into this market in these 3 areas. Okay? So what are you going to need in the way of core competencies that you haven't got? What capabilities do you need? And where's your replacement? Because let's get it clear, like everything, it takes twice as long and costs you twice as much for any project. We're all great, it's going to happen tomorrow, but we learn. And the question is, by the time you've done what you're planning to do, it could be 15 years from now. Where's your replacement? Those are the sort of questions that are of most value. Because, yeah, I'm successful up to now, but it's what about tomorrow? That's the thing.
Well, thank you. That's rich. I look forward to exploring that further with you after this conversation. You were in Houston for an early ICF meeting, and you've had a chance to see this go. Where have you seen the industry kind of navigate since you've been a part of it?
First of all, it's fragmented immensely. There was in 95, 96, when we were in Houston, it was personal and business coaching. And there was the bit of the personal was already fragmenting, and the business wasn't, it was still executive coaching. But the market is fragmented in that way. And dare I say it, the standards that are being practiced aren't necessarily as good as they should be. There's been attempts to regulate the industry, but they've not been very successful. So it's a little bit Wild West out there. What has also been the development is every time there is a recession, the corporate executives get retrenched. They may have taken early redundancy, got a healthy package, so they want to set themselves up as coaches. Some of them buy a franchise, others of them just start out on their own. And so the market gets flooded, and then it 2 or 3 years later, it's cleared out. And I don't think during that time, the reputation of coaching is benefited from it. The other thing that has emerged over the years is what I call formulaic coaching. People buy a franchise, they buy an instruction manual, and you can see them, they're starting off with question A, and it just doesn't work, and they come into it. I think some of the franchisors have got a bit of responsibility here. They're just looking for bums on seats and checks in pocket rather than at the quality that's in there. And I think that's the overriding thing is that quality lasts, quality pays. So yes, there's the good 5% in the industry that'll be around forever and a day. There's lots of people coming and going in there. That would be my reflection on the industry.
No, it's fabulous. I want to pivot here a little bit. We're in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic. I'm curious how the pandemic's changed your life and the lives of business leaders and companies they manage. Curious how you have adapted and how they're adapting. And also wondering what is needed most in this environment and how you've pivoted.
Okay. I've told you about the cancer, and yes, they did get the heart back in pace. They stopped it and started it again, and so forth. And I'm here as insane as ever, and full of life as ever. But during the reconvalescing period, and let me say that the surgery and all the stuff that went with it, that was quite easy. The hardest part was the chemotherapy, and I was on a fairly heavy dose of chemotherapy. And my wife, Constance, kept on asking me the question, if you don't get back to what you want, what you were, what are you going to do? How are you going to sustain this? And I said, oh yeah, we'll just go digital. And she kept on saying, I've heard that for I don't know how many years. When and what are you going to do? Don't worry, it's all going to happen. Now, I don't know who she or he is upstairs, but they have got a warped sense of humor as far as I'm concerned. Every now and again, I get to a blind alley that I've walked down, and that being above hits me with a piece of 2x2 and talks to me quite seriously saying, this ain't the right thing. It wasn't quite a piece of 2x2, but it was a 6x4. I was introduced to Zoom through a Rotary friend. And this wasn't a light bulb moment. This was orgasmic. I saw the future, and I knew I had to be in it and at it. So back in 2015, I could say to Constance, we're going live video. We've got a cloud-based technology. We just now have to work out how what I do face-to-face, we do digitally. So I put together a pilot group of movers and shakers, thought leaders and change makers. And I said, guys, the first meeting, we're on a journey. I don't know where it's going to take us to. You stick around and we'll find out. 18 months later, that pilot group, I said, I've got to drop you. And they said, like, how are you going to drop us? We've enjoyed this travel further than anything. For the next 18 months, we were trying to scale up the project. Wrong time, wrong place. A month ago, I have a piece of paper here on which I wrote, too soon, wait for the tide to turn. Not realizing that a month later, COVID would hit the door. And overnight, forced sampling of Zoom and forced sampling of peer groups on Zoom took over. And my inbox has not been empty since then. So yes, that's why the second division of the What If group is the What If Business Accelerator. And it's the whole experience we had of digital. That's how you and I came to meet in there. So It's changed my life, but it's also changed leaders' lives. Lots of books have been written, lots of articles written about crises management. None of it had this pandemic in mind. Who of us visualized that half of the world will be shut down, locked down for an indeterminate period? Nobody. But then the great thing is there's some wise people out there. What you and I know. Groups always work on the basis of none of us is wiser than all of us. And one of them came up with a lovely quote. It's a 3-stage process, Richard. Survival, reset, and thrive. However, survival might actually have a couple of stages to it. Reset has definitely 3 or 4. And thrive, that's 5 years away.
Yeah.
And that came from, remember, that's what I've shared with people. And that's what's getting people through. Where are you in the survival cycle? And most people are actually tentatively on the reset thing. I think I shared with you the other day the quote that I can't lay credit to. It comes from Jim Belasco, my mentor and Tormentor, ex-professor of business studies at UCLA. He said very casually, the future is in the present. We just haven't seen it yet. And I think that's what's going to happen, that people are looking at the thing, what's going to happen with working from home? What's going to happen to transport? Will the airlines survive? Will people want to travel? How will they want to travel? I know here in the UK, there's a massive movement that's saying, thank goodness I don't have to now get on the commuter train. And I think we're going to see a situation where people are going to say, I want a seat on the train, and I won't accept the train company just packing people in because it's not there. So there's lots of change, but I think also the big change for leaders, and this is the one which is most exciting for me, is that people they no longer want to be led. They wanted to be engaged and consulted. That working from home, people have discovered that, well, the anecdote which best describes it is one of our members is a creative agency in Leeds. His chief copywriter spoke to Gordon and said, he was asking about working from home. She said, it's fabulous. I don't have to get up at 6:30 in the morning and rush down to the station to get onto a train, to worry if I'm going to get to the office on time, to get to the office, to look out the window, to look at the building site opposite, knowing that 3 years from now I'll be looking out over another rabbit hutch and another poor rabbit trapped there. Then walking down to what you call is the creative studio, airless, lightless, visionless, and we're supposed to be creative. She said, and then trying to think about getting home in the evening. This morning, I got up at 6:30. I sat on my deck overlooking the river, and I knocked off 750 words about strawberries and cream for an advert we need to do for a client who's big in cream. She said, finished it by 7:00, emailed it across to the creative director who picked it up, and we were done and dusted before 9:00. Do you think, Gordon, I want to go back? I love you, I love the money you invested in the business, but I don't need the space. Now, the challenge is many managers are, leaders at the present moment are on the command and control. In fact, the copywriter works best at 6:00 in the morning. I've got 3 women in my life who are in the computer industry. They work best at midnight. I don't know what they do, but that's when they work. Gone is the day that you've got to be there at 9 o'clock. You've got to be visited there till 5 o'clock. It's now coming down to, how do I add value? What do I do? That's the biggest challenge, I think, for leaders.
What's the question I haven't asked you that would tell me more about you?
Okay. Many people go to my website, The What If Specialist, and there is a page there of unusual facts about me. And most people latch onto the fact that I did appear on the stage with the Beatles in 1963 in one of their tours. Yeah, people ask about that. What people don't know is that in 1959, I think it was, I got a certificate from the Young Farmers Club, Hedge Layer of the Year. Okay. Do you know what? It's a metaphor for what I do. Because the old guy that taught me said, first thing you do is you walk the length. You size up the hedge, the good bits, the bad bits, where you'll find the bits that you need to support the hedge, where you need the bits for finishing off. He says, and then you go back to the beginning and you start clearing out the undergrowth, the dead wood and all the baggage that's in there. Then you're left with the good saplings, and you've got to choose which one is going to be the first one to be laid and how you're going to splice it so it still grows.
As you look back at your career, can you attribute a single experience, an attribute or skill that has made you a difference maker in the executive coaching industry?
Late 1970s, working for a corn product company in South Africa. We were looking at new ways of communicating with staff inside the organization. And I was working at the business school at the time on a sort of what they call affirmative action. I had a day a week that I could work in the community as an executive, and I decided to work at the business school. And I met a guy called Fred Campy, and he was running a company called Multivisio, which did then audio-visual presentations, which is a fairly new thing, the old tape and slide thing. But from Durban in South Africa, he had a client base which was international CEOs of major corporations. And I was talking to him one day as to what he did, what made him so special. And he said two things. Number one, for me to help the chairman of Unilever's communicate better, I have to get inside his head. I have to understand what it is that motivates him to say what he says. It's not about what he says. I want to understand the motivation behind it so I can give it the right emphasis when we present it. And I listened to Fred, and a few weeks later, JB and Jansfeld from Unilever's, the then president, was in Fred's garden office. The head of Unilever's worldwide had come to South Africa to sit with Fred. And I happened to be in there. And I said to JB, I said, why is it that you come all this way? And he said, because this man here asks me the questions nobody else will ask. He'll chat to me about things so casually that he'll get underneath my thinking. He understands everything about my family. Nobody in the advertising, nobody in my business asks me about my family because they're supposed to be here doing business. Fred sits and asks me about my family. And I tell him. And he says, I come here for therapy. And I'd heard Fred say, I need to get inside his head. I heard JB say, this is what he was. And I realized then that no matter who you are, president of a country, president of a company, president of the local Rotary Club, you all want to talk about what's inside you and inside your head. And that's been my guiding mantra, along with Fred's other things, saying, if it's been done that way before, there must be another way of doing it. So those are the two things. And it all comes from dear old Fred, God bless him. Get inside people's head and ask them, if you've done it that way before, can we do it differently?
Marvelous. Well, Richard, I've got a lot of notes here. In our time together, you've introduced a concept of discovery learning. It reminds me of where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, and trying to hunt for that knowledge of being an ideation facilitator. This whole notion about what if. You shared with us 3 challenges that you offer them. You talked about how businesses go forward. You talked about how you don't want to be a blood donor for businesses. One I liked, that you are a tormentor for those that you work with, that you encourage them. You shared with us some of the greats that were from the area, people who have helped you, like Thomas Leonard and others that were in your past. You shared with us some of your best quotes. You've talked about how you've helped some of your members. And the one I thought was most poignant, and I had not heard this question or hadn't thought this would be the singularly most important question. You said, what does your family think? You share with us some of your tools, the be, do, have exercise, listening to your gut, and the power of silence. And all of this was just wonderful. So I want to thank you so much for your time, for being fully present. Your insights today, for me, it was a rich experience to observe more about you and to learn your personal why, to learn about your business and to explore how you continue to be a difference maker in the lives of those you serve as an executive coach. So thank you. Now, my guest today was the executive coach, Richard Bosworth, CEO of What If Forums, an executive coaching practice that started in 1967, operates from London, England, and today works with national and international businesses, large and small, helping them grow. One of my favorite business authors, Clayton Christensen, recently passed away, and prior to his passing, he wrote a book, How Will You Measure Your Life? I'm wondering how you will measure your life.
I have measured it. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with bowel cancer, and I was on experimental treatment, which worked extremely well, except there were complications, and I ended up with what do you call it? Cardio arrhythmia. My heart was running wild. Most terrifying thing, because it was like the throttle had just gone off the heart and it was racing away. I could feel it doing 200 beats a minute. And boy, that pulls the energy out of you like anything. And I got a sense that the medical team were deeply concerned. So in that one afternoon with my daughters, I was talking about the fact, what legacy, and I'm disappointed I've left a legacy. And the youngest one turned to me, Dad, and said, Dad, we're going to have a problem. Where do we hold your funeral? What do you mean? She said, even for a funeral, where do we hold the weight to go with it? There's so many people that you've touched that will want to come and say something. And that stunned me. That at that moment in time, they were worrying about how big the weight was going to be. But what it said to me was, I'm not leaving behind a building, an institution, even a business. I'm not leaving behind. I'm leaving behind a legacy that's walking around there that will tell the stories of the time they had with me. You can't ask for more than that.